Ukrainian Crisis Media Center continues its work, and now we'll hear from representatives of the business answers to the question what the taxpayers should expect from the new managers of the State Fiscal Service of Ukraine. Good morning. I am Dmytro Oleksiyenko. I am head of the Public Advisory Board to the State Fiscal Service, and I have here Yulia Drohovoz, who is the Vice President of our Advisory Board, and Olha Bohdanova, who is the head of the Board of Governors. And we're today talking about the announcement by the Prime Minister Yatsenyuk of the competition to select the new head of the State Fiscal Service. As you remember, the Prime Minister told us about this on Monday. However, until today, there is no official information on any official site about the conditions and the schedule of this competition and selection process. We are very much concerned with this situation because we think that this process should be as transparent as possible. As a public advisory board, we were in favor of this and demanded this even before the announcement by the Prime Minister was made. But you know, although the State Fiscal Service cooperates with the American Chamber of Commerce and the European Business League, they do not have cooperation with the real representatives of business circles in Ukraine. We demanded a meeting with the Prime Minister so that we talk to him, but there's no answer. We demanded a public report by the state body and the State Fiscal Service. They did not do it. We don't know even why some people were removed from their offices and some were left in place. We think that the violations that were spotted should become a program of action for the new management, and this program should be the basis for the entire selection process, what the new head of service should do. And now I give the floor to Yulia. Of course, this is not a secret that the opinion of the public board and the public in general, they do not listen to them. Today we had to meet the Prime Minister, but as you see, there is no meeting, and this means that they do not want to conduct a dialogue, and all the decisions are being adopted in a closed manner, in a secret manner. We want all the processes to happen publicly and transparently, and we do want a dialogue to be established. As far as the investigation commission is concerned, I and Olha Bohdanova took part in this commission as experts, and what Mr. Yatsenyuk is talking now about, after the commission has decided to leave Belarus in place, we see that there are facts that do testify to embezzlement and abuse within the fiscal service. We've been talking about this for quite some time. We have established that there are layers of problems that, for instance, pertain to budget compensation, tax credits, the so-called tax holes, and there are problems with overpayment and with pardoning the debt. Also, the quality of regarding the complaints by taxpayers, and we understood that all those issues that we saw, they were in place with Mr. Klimenko, who used to head the fiscal service before, and there have been no significant changes in the work of the fiscal service. On the contrary, it became less efficient. And I think Olha Bohdanova will tell us about this. And we understood that there should be a decision to remove Mr. Belows from his office. And now we understand that our next process is to make sure that the selection of candidates and the decision should be based on public, transparent approaches. And as a result of the work of the Commission, we have a list of demands that should be addressed by the new management of the State Fiscal Service. We understood that, for instance, budget compensation was done in a ad hoc manner, on the basis of some agreements, some corruption actions, some overpayment. And we've seen that the register that was formed on the lowest level, this does not mean that the taxpayers from this register will make it to the register that is being done to the ministry, given to the ministry. And they didn't have any chance to get into the list for budgetary compensation that were going to the Treasury and then to different ministries. We see a lot of steps that the State Fiscal Service should do in order to fight these problems. There should be a common mechanism of distribution of money, proportional one, for instance. There should be a common approach that will allow to exclude human factor. As far as tax holes are concerned, the situation hasn't become better, and although we have a mechanism to fight and to win over those tax holes, we still did not see the well-adjusted work, and the responsibility was dispersed. There was no clear-cut responsibility of every department for the efficiency of fighting the tax holes. And as a result, we see that everything is working as it was working, and the situation has not changed. And of course, more than 90% of complaints being treated in favor of the State Fiscal Service testifies to the fact that the task was to treat these cases in favor of the Fiscal Service. While in courts, the proportion is 70% of decisions in favor of taxpayers. And this is the picture that characterizes the attitude and the relation between the Fiscal Service and taxpayers. While looking into complaints and while studying the documents that we have, there are two things. A lot of enterprises have been registered in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. No one works with them, and they are avoiding paying taxes. And the second issue is that very often they use the act on the impossibility to check the reports, which works against real taxpayers, and some enterprises get the status of transit entities. And our main task today is to concentrate on how the selection process and competition will be held, because at the moment the conditions haven't been published, not even the regulation on the Commission to select the management of the State Fiscal Service. Our public advisory board is prepared not only to demand the holding of the contest, but we also are ready to nominate our candidates for this, and we are very much prepared to fight further if we see that the appointment has a political whiff to it. Within the framework of this investigation, we don't have a goal to change, to replace specific people. There's no just a desire to replace people, there's a desire to change the system. And we would like the results of the work of the Commission be published, and that we see decisions on every complaint that was filed against the Ministry of Economy within the limits of this investigation. There was a lot of complaints about raiding the enterprises, and the taxpayers who were writing these complaints, filing these complaints, were the persons who were in real despair. People have to go through 3 or 4 court hearings in order to get their complaints considered. For instance, there's a uncompensated VAT. What is the reason for this? Maybe a chamber inspection, maybe there's a court appeal, but the fact that this chamber inspection should be held within 30 days, and we see that complaints are dated June or July, we see that the terms of inspection are artificially delayed. And of course there are some companies that have dozens of thousands of employees, but there are some companies that fall into the category of those who should be automatically compensated. They don't get it, and the companies that are now in supporting the managers of the State Fiscal Service, those are respected companies, but they, were in the list of Mr. Klimenko, and they are exporters who are being taxed on according to decreased rates. And if we take Klimenko's lists and compare with the decree of Mr. Klimenko from December 2013, we see that the top 20 companies that get compensation every month, then we see that these lists are more or less identical. On the one hand, they get compensation, but if we, for instance, see the financial reports and accounts of these companies, which can be done in an open and transparent way, we can get the accounts from there, and we'll see that these companies are systematically loss-making, and we are talking about negative general profit. They sell their produce at prices less than indicative, non-systematic compensation and very negative financial accountability. And you know, they are in the list of those taxpayers who support the activity of the managers of the State Fiscal Service. There was a appeal to make public the lists of companies that do not get compensation of VAT, but they, you know, give us replies saying that they cannot publicly give those lists and they cannot open this information. I think that this is very wrong. We should go along the principle, if you have 7 billion in the treasury and they want to compensate you for 9 billion, then you should work proportionally, but not all the time with these top 20. About the schemes, lately I've been one of the most fervent enemies of the electronic administration. We are in fact in favor of this, and a year ago when a commission at the Ministry of Economy started to work, I filed my suggestions in this respect about tax invoices and so on. We are against the depositing of VAT accounts. I want to draw your attention to a picture, and I will give you, of course, a slide that I will ask to publish. But in fact, the Ukrainian market is being entered by some importers, and then you have Ukrainian manufacturers, and then you either sell it on the domestic market or sell it abroad. The importer won't, of course, very much feel the depositing of the money, and they do not have to extract much money from the turnover. And the system of depositing does not spread to an importer at all. And the Article 120 of the tax code were written that non-registration of you as a taxpayer of VAT does not mean fines, then means that there is only one market participant, the Ukrainian manufacturer, who does fall into the depositing accounts, and they either sell their produce to exporters or to Ukrainian networks with a delay for 90 days or 80 days, and this system within a month or two will do damage to Ukrainian manufacturers who are in the small or medium-sized business. In September, October, they will understand, oh, our tax credits went somewhere, they disappeared. The system that exists today, you know, I have once again become convinced that the system launched in 2012 by Mr. Klemenko is a monster that allowed the former managers of the State Fiscal Service to control all the process and chains with the VAT. So I'd like to emphasize that the mechanism that exists does allow to see those companies that are being protected by authorities, and they are also protected at the level of the territorial bodies of the State Fiscal Service. So as a summing up, we'd ask for the public character of conclusions of looking into complaints and relates change the system, not replace people. Any questions, colleagues? Yulia Samayeva, Дзеркало Тижня. I have two questions. First question, as far as I know, since the number of the members of the council has increased to 120, many of the participants say that the council is practically paralyzed because it is very hard to get the quorum. No, there was not a single case of problems. Everyone comes to our assemblies, but what can guarantee that the new people, even if they come to this position according to an open contest, where's the guarantee that they won't become a part of the system? Because, you know, it's about huge money, and it's hard to abstain from joining the system and continuing the embezzlement. Thank you very much. I think that everyone will answer. Very good question connected to what we are talking about. We're asking that the Competition Commission, Selection Commission, demands not the English language or the participation in auditing companies, but a clear-cut program of action according to which we as public could see what the service will become in a year or so, and the registration of, you know, full illustration, how many people will be removed from their offices. That's why we demand this quotient according to which we could control the new management of the State Fiscal Service. And you know, this is the demand that will lead to the transparency of this process, because the process of the investigation of the former management was non-transparent, and we don't see a report. Some people say that the trust to those who were removed from their offices has increased, because they were, you know, they alleged that they were removed because they have nothing to be reproached of. And we understand very well how this should be in ideal.
People come who want to say something, and it's not one person, this should be teamwork. And here it's not the issue about whether these people will come and will become a team, but I believe that we can find some allies in the service, and if there's the philosophy there, then those who agree to work according to this philosophy will stay. As to low salaries, we understand how this should be. These are low salaries, not just like it was in the past when people would receive big money in envelopes. But here, if there is a real fighting with gaps, there should be no, or with pits, there should be no envelopes. And those people who will come should be volunteers. That's a volunteer type of work, working as volunteers for some objective, getting the salary which is not high, and people who have certain income should just sacrifice it. And the main question to be resolved, if we want to reform the service, then the salary shouldn't be that low. It will be reduction, creating of more analytical centers, more work on risk management, but to demand that people fight with pits when the salary is 2,000-3,000, that's not realistic. Reforms are to be implemented, and only then we will hope that the result will be efficient. One more thing, as to, you mentioned the council, and it's difficult to get them. Many people want to get rid of all the councils, but new ones are not set up. There are 146 of us representatives, and many are unhappy with this council. It cannot be a pocket type council. That is really the council that represents all the different taxpayers. Why the Cabinet of Ministers doesn't listen to that, it's a question to the Cabinet of Ministers. But and people, if there is pressure on them, they're ready to go out into the streets. We are trying not to allow this to happen. We're trying to do everything possible because we have enough wars in Ukraine. Sorry, we have the speakers for the next briefing. If you have questions, then privately. I believe our guests will be able to talk to you in the lobby, and you will answer all the questions. Thank you. I hope that in a month and two we will see you again with the head of the State Fiscal Service, who will be elected publicly and would